Good morning, Chaos fans. Just a little note before you listen to today's episode that it's a little bit heavier than our average episodes. Today we're going to be having our special guest, and we're going to be talking about the Armenian Genocide and events related to that. So if you're listening with kids, which we've gotten some messages about, you may want to listen to this one ahead of time, or at least be prepared for any questions, just in case we get into some heavier topics that you might be uncomfortable with. We'll keep it family friendly still, but just a little warning.
So we do have a guest in the studio today. Our guest today is Mr. T. Come on, say it. Say it.
I pity a fool.
Awesome. we got to be light in the beginning and light in the end of this. So, as our usual practice is with a guest, we do have 10 questions for our guest, Mr. T, this morning. Jason, are you ready with 10 questions?
I'm ready with the 10
Now,
questions.
these questions are rapid fire. Are they one-word answers, or are they going to be just short answer?
They are one-word answers.
Ooh, one-word answer. So, whatever comes to mind, boom. Okay?
I'm on it.
All right.
You ready?
Yep.
All right. Hard tacos or soft tacos?
Soft tacos.
Would you be...
And so it begins.
Get the first question. All right, go ahead. Sorry, man.
Would you be a hunter or a gatherer?
Hunter.
Red vines or Twizzlers?
Twizzlers.
King Kong or Godzilla?
King Kong.
Is a monkey a four-legged animal?
No.
Do you drive with one hand or two?
One.
Regular golf or mini golf?
Mini golf.
Digital watch or analog watch?
Digital watch.
Name one state this city is in. Kansas City.
Missouri.
What is scarier, a kangaroo or a wolf?
Wolf.
What, we got to back this track up just a little bit.
What?
Red vines or Twizzlers? That's not even a competition.
Red vines are best.
They're the worst.
They are the worst.
Not the worst.
They are the worst. Okay?
I prefer red vines.
You're the only one. Okay?
There's less of that other stuff in there.
They probably make $1 billion a year, and it's all from you, because I don't know a single other person that eats red vines.
They're so hard to find.
That's why, because nobody else eats them. They stock them in the one convenience store that you shop at.
They don't sell them there. You got to keep an eye out because they just pop up. Like Safeway will sell them by the bucket size. You have to buy the whole bucket.
Do you buy a whole bucket of red vines?
That's all they sell them as. Although when we went to Hawaii, they did have them in the packets, so I bought some there.
What, they immigrated?
They have all kinds of weird candy over there.
Really?
Yeah.
They do eat weird stuff. And I won't say weird stuff, different stuff than we do. I mean, I think a majority of the Spam that's eaten in the United States is eaten in Hawaii.
That's not.
I think it's true. You have to look that one up. Where's our fact checker?
She quit.
I think she tells us we have to start paying her.
It's not going to happen.
What was it that we decided we were going to pay her in yesterday? Starbucks gift cards or something.
No, not Starbucks.
I don't know. She hates Starbucks. She's totally anti-Starbucks. Where can you go and just buy cake pops? Not too many places you can just walk into.
Do you make your own cake pops?
Heck no, but I know people that do.
I
Oh my
make
God,
cake pops.
Oh my God, you do?
Yeah, my wife bought a machine and I made fun of her.
There's a machine?
How do you think you make them?
I don't know.
You make them with a cake pop machine.
Dude, how have I not known this?
You make the cake pop and then we filled the inside with cake icing and then dipped them in chocolate. Oh, man. Anyways, back to the topic. We have a special guest here today.
Okay, special guest here today. It is going to be a little heavy topic today, since we are going to be talking about the Armenian Genocide, which is something that I would say that Mr. T at least has a fair amount of expertise in. Is that correct?
Yes, I'd say that.
Okay, so we'll just jump right into it. What do you think, Jason?
Yes, please.
Okay. So, Mr. T, could you give us just a brief history of the political climate during the Armenian Genocide and when it actually was? Because most people don't even know when it occurred.
Sure. So my brief history might not be so brief, just because this is a topic that's quite hits home dear to my heart here. Been involved in the whole process for basically since I was almost born. I remember going to a lot of these demonstrations from a young age of 5 years old or so. Just as a background here, the Armenian Genocide occurred between 1915 and 1923-ish. April 24th of 1915 was really used as a date. They call that Bloody Sunday because that was really the day that the order was made by the Young Turks who ruled at the time to start the systematic killings. Before the Young Turks even took over power, the Armenians were under the Ottoman Empire rule. Well before that, most of the Ottoman rulers, they were basically all Muslim. They permitted the Armenians to practice, but also subjected them to higher taxes and viewed them as almost like infidels. unequal and unjust type treatments and things like that. So
because the Armenians, if I'm not mistaken, Armenians are Christians, right? Because I think a majority of Armenians were like what, apostolic.
Correct.
Armenian.
That's correct. Okay. Yes.
So,
absolutely right.
Yeah, and so you basically have a situation where you have the Ottomans, who are, in fact, more or less was a Sharia law country. I mean, they didn't call it that at the time, but it was Muslim rule. Basically. And then we have the Armenians that are all Christians, and then therefore let's drop the hammer on them, and they did.
Yeah, and that's right. That's exactly what happened. And so, yeah, the Armenian nation in a whole was the first country to basically adopt Christianity as its religion. From then, it's been filled with a lot of obstacles. Just the region that they're in. Today, we have Georgia, which is north of Armenia, which provides us some lack on the north side of us. But basically, everywhere around us, you have Muslim nations. Landlocked Muslim nations.
Azerbaijan borders modern-day Armenia. Now,
correct.
They're a Muslim country, correct?
They are, and there's actually a part of Armenia within Azerbaijan called Nagorno-Karabakh, and there's a lot of war today still to basically keep that territory as part of Armenia. Because during the genocide and after the genocide, a large part of the Armenian borders were basically taken, in essence, and through the wars of World War I, with Russian influence and other political powers, it was basically one of those issues where territories were provided to other countries as we're just gonna kind of carve this out.
Right.
And amazingly enough, Karabakh happens to be in a mountainous type region where it was hard to take that land. And so till today we maintain that land. All of eastern Turkey, almost halfway of modern day eastern Turkey, was under Armenian rule.
Yeah, that was referred to as Eastern Armenia, I think, wasn't it?
Western Armenia, yeah.
I thought well, you would know better than I would, but there was a large Armenian population on the European side of the Ottoman Empire, around Constantinople, which is now Istanbul. Mm-hmm. But there was a very large... What, it was still Constantinople at the time.
I thought you were going to start singing. Sorry.
But the eastern, like you said, the eastern half, that was mostly Armenian. Right.
That's right. As the Ottoman Empire started to crumble at the end of the century, Sultan Hamid was basically obsessed with loyalty overall. He felt as though the Armenian campaign, support to Russia, things like that, would start to cause him a problem. And so that's really, before the genocide even started, there was quite a few of these pogroms in 1909 and 1894 timeframe that were already massacres beginning to happen just because of the religion and everything like that. And that really did happen well before the Young Turks took over. So the Young Turks took over in about 1908 timeframe to make it more of a democratic state. And I say that very loosely.
That was a coup against the Sultan, correct?
That's correct.
From what I read about it a little bit, now the Armenian population was actually happy that the coup occurred, believing that they were returning the country to a constitutional monarchy.
That's correct.
And they thought it was going to be a good thing, and it turned out to be the worst thing.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Young Turks, and a little bit of a fact about that terrible name. There's a news outlet that's called the Young Turks. They're well known and they provide a lot of news these days internationally and everything like that. And we have a big problem with that name, obviously.
Yeah.
The fact that they're called that, the fact that the three pashas who actually started this whole genocide called themselves the Young Turks as this revolutionary type movement to overthrow the Sultan. And so, that's pretty ignorant. What's going on today? It's almost like having a news outlet being called the Young Nazis. Yeah. Like, that's crazy to me that people would even be okay with this. But alas, here we stand. So yeah, just what you were saying, they thought, great, the Young Turks are going to be coming in. We were already oppressed under the Sultan rule. This is going to give us an opportunity to get out. And so when they took over, they were all for it, right? Let's do this and it's going to be a great time. But they quickly learned that the Young Turks basically, they just wanted to Turkify the empire. I mean, the Ottoman Empire kind of allowed the Armenians to stay there. It didn't really bother them. The Armenians were actually quite successful under Ottoman rule, even with these things that stood in their way. But it worked.
Now, leading up to the coup, that was actually just after the First Balkan War in Serbia, Herzegovina, Bosnia. After that war was over, all of the Muslims from that region, so that's in extreme Eastern Europe, just west of where Istanbul is, all the Muslims in that area were forced to leave. So those people were forced to leave the Balkans, and they were all sent basically to Turkey. So you had these angry Muslims who were forced out of their homes and sent to Turkey, and a lot of them ended up settling in Armenian neighborhoods because those were the poorer neighborhoods. That's the areas where they could go. And so now they see these Armenians that are living better than they are. And then when the coup happens, it was just kind of like, I think it was like a light switch. Like, hey, these people are killing us. Let's get them out of here. Besides, we're all Muslims. We should get rid of these non-Muslims anyway, the infidels, really. I think there were so many things that occurred leading up to the actual genocide that were certain catalysts that if they didn't happen in a certain order, it probably wouldn't have been as bad. I mean, it wasn't good to begin with. I mean, as you mentioned, in the 1800s, there were massacres periodically, I would say, all the way back until the mid-1800s, I think. So,
Sure, yep.
So that was a really interesting period leading up to that caused all those little things to happen. From what I read about the genocide as a whole is that it wasn't scripted. We'll use the Holocaust as an example. The Nazis scripted out everything.
Yep.
They had a plan. They called it, the final solution to the Jewish question. Mm-hmm. So they had a plan all set out. Okay, we're going to do X, Y, and Z to get rid of these people. Whereas I don't think the Turks had an overall, or the Ottomans, we'll call them the Ottomans, didn't have an overall arching plan to do this, but they didn't stop groups within the government from doing that.
Correct. It certainly wasn't as planned as what happened in the Holocaust. However, they certainly did have death camps almost, and you can find them online, march trails in the camps that people would go to if they were able to get past those camps and having to cross over the desert on their way over to these countries that the diaspora now lives in. Even though Armenians were still looked down as second-class citizens, you still had some Armenians within the government, right? And so they worked together, and if something like that would have been brought up, it would have been leaked out to the people, obviously, to, hey, pack up your stuff and get out. But it wasn't. So that's how quick it happened, right?
Yeah.
I guess the 1914 timeframe when the whole World War I was really beginning. Obviously, Turkey took the side of the Germans and the Austro-Hungarians. And basically what ended up happening was that at the same time, they basically declared a holy war against all Christians except for their allies.
I think that was one of the reasons why they got away with it as long as they did, is because the whole incident is basically shrouded by World War I.
That is the guise that they use to today. That's the argument, right? There was death on both sides. You were fighting us. We were fighting you. Like, what's the big deal here?
Yeah, there wasn't a heck of a lot of fighting going on in the Ottoman Empire during World War I. I mean, there was, but it wasn't a lot. And most of the eastern side of Turkey, where most of the Armenians lived, that's where most of the Armenians were murdered. The ones who didn't live there, the ones who were, I guess, forced migration from the western part of Turkey to the eastern part of Turkey, when they got there, then they just decided to kill them anyway. Right. I saw some photos during my research, photos of roads that literally were just lined with corpses because they were doing these forced marches with people, and they didn't provide them any food, didn't provide them any water, didn't provide them any shelter, so they didn't really have any means to sustain themselves except for what they brought with them. So if they ran out, it's like, well, too bad, so sad. Yeah, right. Here, why don't you just curl up and die on the side of the road? We'll see you later. But then when they did get there, it was mass burnings. They would kind of corral them all into like a hayloft or some building and just set it on fire. The ones that I thought were, this is cold-blooded. I mean, burning somebody alive, yeah. But they were taking barges full of women and children out into the Black Sea and either just capsizing the barges or just throwing them overboard.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is absolutely cold-blooded.
Yeah. Drowning and burned are probably the worst ways you can go down. Yeah. That's terrible. My family has told me many stories about what's really, and I did have family that was affected by the Armenian Genocide. And so, yeah, they did get sent through like the Mesopotamian desert without like the food and the water and all that. A lot of the women were either taken on their marches, the pretty ones, right, and unfortunately raped or forced to become Muslim, and they would just basically take them. But a lot of the other ones would fake stuff. They would fake being blind. They would fake having no eye. They would shut their eyes. They would rub stuff on their bodies so they wouldn't look as good. So they wouldn't be taken. So I can't imagine really but it was almost instantaneous. On April 24th, they called Bloody Sunday, and it's basically out of nowhere, right? They came, they already knew where the Armenians lived due to the taxes and everything like that. So they basically came and started to collect all the intellectuals, all the artists, all the professors, all those guys. They were all the first business owners. They were the first to be collected. Oh, wow. They wanted to make sure that all the smart people who could sort of maintain order within the Armenian community were gone, and then it would be just mass chaos at that point for everybody else. Just as a quick note, I think I told both of you guys before, there's a movie, The Promise, with Christian Bale and Oscar Isaac.
Oh, yeah.
Recommend people to go watch that. It's a love story that's based during this whole incident. And Christian Bale is an American journalist. He plays an American journalist in the movie, and Oscar Isaac obviously plays an Armenian guy that was in love with this girl. And it really does get into what happened, and you do get a nice little reference of Bloody Sunday and how it really did go down. And but it's not like a documentary.
Right.
It's a fun watch, if you will, with quotes, because it's not like you're not just sitting there and just being fed information. It's really putting it under
an actual context of what we could perceive as being real.
I have a little bias, but I personally, I did love it. And the actors were great. So if anything, go see it for that, for the actors. It'll shed some light on really what was going on. So yeah, during that time, in 1915, that started. They started, all the movement to turn over all these Armenians out of the area to make it a more Muslim nation. And they did use the guys, like you said, of World War I to make sure that happened. They said that, again, the Armenians were backing their enemies and they're too close. We need to get them away. And using that, they committed this heinous crime. But mind you, it didn't just happen to Armenians, right? There was plenty of Christians in the area. The Greeks were there. Assyrians were there. Syriacs, Pontians, all those people, they were there. Once today, I will say, though, that Turkey was almost mixed bag between Armenians and Turks and Greeks and everything like that. Right now, there's less than 0.1% of their population is Christian.
Wow.
It's basically almost, at this point, wiped out.
Wow.
So they succeeded in doing what they wanted to do.
Yeah. Only
part is they didn't succeed in exterminating completely the Armenian population. Just because we moved all over the place. The U.S. has the most Armenians. It has more Armenians than Armenia. We're all over, right? Australia, Canada, South America, Brazil, Argentina.
Now, that actually sounds like a really good segue, because earlier you mentioned you do have family history, obviously, since you are Armenian, which is why we have you on as a guest today. You do have family story as to how your family wound up in the United States. Could you go through that?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the cities are old cities, so even if you go look at it now, you won't necessarily find the names. They might be just renamed under a different city based off the Turkish changes in the names. But yeah, after, I was coming into this, I just wanted to rehash my ancestry and get a better idea of what happened. And so I called some of my family members to give me a nice little background, and they did. And the crazy part is that on my dad's side, it's very fuzzy, okay? My great-grandparents were from Armenia on both sides of my family. My dad's side, his father died at a very young age, and his mom really blocked out a lot of the stuff that really happened. She was 4 years old when it happened, grandmother. And on my father's side, they grew up in this area called Sis, S-I-S. And it's close to Yerevan, which is the current capital of Armenia. When that happened, they basically started to migrate, and a lot of this was done walking. I mean, this is not a close trek.
Yeah.
But they ended up walking. There's a huge population in Beirut, Lebanon. Syria is just south of Turkey. And so that was one of the easiest parts. And Sis is much closer to Syria than it is to other countries. Ideally, they would have all went to Georgia just because of the religious background. But it was just the easiest one because
they walked.
They basically walked.
From Armenia to Syria.
Mm-hmm.
This is your
my father's
grandfather
side.
On your father's side, and your grandmother.
Correct. Same thing. So my grandfather and grandmother, they grew up in different cities, obviously, but
I guess they weren't together at that.
Right. So yeah.
Did he have any siblings too that went, or was it just like the three of them, or did the whole family kind of go together?
On my father's side,
yeah, my
grandmother had her parents. My great grandparents were killed.
Okay.
So her aunt ended up having to take her.
Wow.
And he was, my great-grandparents were actually, my dad tells this story. Again, it's a little fuzzy because it's been passed down, but he basically said that his grandfather was beheaded at his front step. Like they basically made shows out of the whole thing. You know what I mean? Some people were beheaded, hanged, just shot right there. So there was no holding back. I mean, it wasn't like the other people had guns.
This is your great-grandfather was beheaded on his front steps.
Mm-hmm. So it's wild.
That's rough.
And he's not the only one, actually. On my mother's side, there was a beheading as well. And they just use that as just scare tactics. Move out of here and you'll be safe. While you're moving out of here, you're following this trail of migration. Camps along the way are grabbing you and killing you, so you can't leave the country, right?
Wow. So your aunt basically like grabbed up your grandfather and just took off.
My grandmother.
Your grandmother.
Yeah,
your grandmother.
Yeah.
Just made a run for it.
Yeah, they left. She had a brother as well. He got lost.
Oh wow.
So
there's no telling whether he was even survived.
No, we don't know. Yeah. So your family tree is shattered. You don't know. Like
you can only go back now.
You can't go back really much further than 1915 time frame for a lot of us.
Wow.
Because that was such a huge shock to everybody. So they did that on my mother's side, which their last names were actually changed a few times because they actually ended up killing some Turks on the way down to Syria. So my mother's side, they migrated over to Halep or Aleppo, which is Halep is about 45 minutes to an hour drive from Aleppo. But a lot of the Armenians went to Aleppo initially just to meet up with family.
Yeah.
Right. They basically said, we're going there.
Just meet us all there.
If I lose you, we say go to the security guard at the mall.
Right.
They said go to Aleppo and we'll find you.
And Aleppo is not a small city either.
No.
It's the capital of ISIS territory now.
Yeah. So they ended up going there, and then they ended up moving to Halep, and it was just mainly because it was a huge city and there's too many people there at one point. So they ended up just going to Halep, and that's where my mother grew up. Was in Halep.
Okay.
And then my dad grew up in Beirut. But yeah, on my mother's side, like I said, they were from an area called Dikranabert. Today it's called like Diyarbakir or something like that. I don't even know what the name is today, but we could certainly find it. They did end up moving there, and then eventually they obviously found their way here, right, to the U.S. So once they were there, my mom's side family, the last name was changed due to the killings. They were going to come looking for people who did those killings. So just as an attempt to like not be found, the last name was changed there in Halep. They came over to the U.S. to Philadelphia, because they just were, again, you're in a state where you're not a citizen, right?
Yeah.
We see this today here, even in the U.S., right? You're not a citizen. You're treated as a second class still. So what do you do to better your life, to better your kid's life and everything? Like, you come to the U.S. They didn't even go to school. I mean, my mom went to 4th grade and my father went to 3rd grade, just from the fact that they needed money, so they were working. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that affected me big time as an adult going to college or high school or grade school, because I didn't have a father or mother to be like, hey, Mom, I'm having trouble with this math homework.
Right.
Can you help me out? You know what I mean? So it really stunk. I mean, I studied probably 3-4 times more than anybody else. Can't just go up to my
You had no support. You had no support structure, effectively.
Yeah, nothing. And educationally, emotionally and morally, they were 100% there. But educationally, so I sometimes find myself helping my sons today, and I'm just like, wow, like, I didn't have that.
Yeah.
So I tried patient as possible with them.
When did they come over to Philadelphia?
So my mom's family came to Philadelphia when she was, I think she was like 12-ish, 13-ish.
Okay.
She was here at a pretty young age.
This is sometime in the 1960s?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, sometime in the 60s.
And then my dad, though, was in a rock band in Lebanon, in Beirut. So, I see all this cool pictures. Looking back at pictures, you think of your dad as like this old guy, but like, looking back at pictures, I was like, wow, that guy's a hippie. Yeah. so it's pretty cool to look at some of these pictures. So he played in a rock band, and he was a great guitarist and everything like that. So whenever a lot of the Armenian singers would travel to the U.S. to perform, they'd call my dad to come and perform.
Oh, wow.
And so one day he was asked to come and perform, and he never left.
He just stuck around.
He just stayed here. And he was here illegally for a little bit, and that's why I have so much compassion for what's happening today. There's a fine line to be drawn between allowing things to happen and not allowing them to happen. But when you're in an area of turmoil, you don't care. To be quite honest with you, it's like, I don't care if I'm doing something illegal or not. I'm sorry. I understand that you may have a problem with it, but this is my life, and I'm going to try to better it. So,
right.
He ended up coming here, and he moved to Boston. And when he moved to Boston, he was all over the place. He moved to Boston, then moved down to Philadelphia, ended up meeting my mom, and then moved back up to Boston, had my brother, moved back down to Philly. Then, again, this is all then because there's work, right? He's a jeweler, he's a shoemaker. Work is scarce, and he's trying to continuously find jobs and create some money for us. So
that's a rare profession.
He's all
Cobbler?
Yeah.
It's a really rare profession. Your dad's a cobbler?
Yeah.
That's so strange.
Yeah. Yeah. He's all over the place. Yeah. He picked up stuff along the way just to make ends meet, and ended up going to California and then had me. That's where I was born. And then we went back to Philadelphia. And so they went from Boston, Philly, Cali, back, and all over the place. Oh. And then we finally settled in California because that's where, Philadelphia, because that's where my mother's parents were.
Okay.
And so, yeah, they ended up doing that. The whole genocide definitely skewed our path to where we are today. I wouldn't have it any other way in terms of where I ended up. So,
would you rather be in Aleppo or would you rather be in Philadelphia?
Right.
You know, truthfully.
Oh boy.
You don't know. Maybe it would have been great in Aleppo. Who knows?
But, who knows? Yeah. You don't know. But we know the issues today over there, so probably not.
No, I think it would have been a horrible choice if I had to choose between the two.
It's important to note, though, when it comes down, going back to the whole genocide ordeal, I mean, other countries knew what was going on. There was enough reporting, there was enough journalism back then to get the word out. We had Henry Morgenthau, who was the ambassador, the Armenian ambassador to the U.S.
Yeah,
he's in this movie, The Promise, too. Basically, the scene that he's in, which is that movie was quite emotional. Like he goes into this office of one of the officers within the Turkish military. That guy basically says, he goes, I need all the names of the Armenian population that have been killed, or you know what I mean, or have left. Their lands are now part of the Turkish government.
Oh, wow.
and everything like that. And he just basically said, over my dead body, you're not getting that from me. You know what I mean? He's like, I know what was done. I know it was systematic, and you're just not gonna. You're not gonna get it. He came back 1,000 times and told the Americans, this is happening. We may want to intervene a little bit here, but the U.S. was kind of caught up in the World War.
And that's another interesting.
That's unfortunate because.
Well, the United States never declared war on the Ottoman Empire. They declared war on Germany, but they never declared war on the Ottoman Empire. So during World War I, during when all this was happening, there were actually several U.S. consulates in the country, in the empire. And so they actually witnessed. They have accounts from eyewitnesses to a lot of this stuff. But at the time, we were very isolationist as a country at that point.
Right.
So the fact that we declared war on Germany at all was really kind of a surprise. I mean, we only did it because of incidents that led to us to doing that, but we did not want to declare war on everybody. We just wanted to declare war on one specific group that perpetrated something against us. So the Ottomans at that point technically hadn't, so we never declared war against the Ottomans. So our consulates remained open.
Yeah,
during World War I.
They just took advantage of a bad situation.
They did.
They did what they wanted to.
They did, and it's a shame. I mean, I'll still go to a lot of debate sessions and talks on both sides. I'm not just going to be completely biased and hear one side of the story. I want to hear both sides of the story. So I'll go to a lot of the Turkish demonstrations as well, just to kind of listen.
Yeah,
it boils my blood, but I'll sit there and I'll take it because I'm interested to see the other side. So yeah, it certainly happened.
Yeah.
There's a crazy gag rule, if you will, right now in place in America. U.S. has not recognized the genocide. 49 of the 50 states have, but as a whole, we have not.
Do you know what the one state is that hasn't?
I don't even know. That's a great question. I'll have to look that up. But yeah, it's crazy to me that the U.S. hasn't recognized it. But at the same time, it's not. We have way too many interests in Turkey. Way too many interests.
We have a lot of military installations in Turkey.
Right. You don't want to get rid of those. It's a perfect location. Today, people just back down to them, and I don't know why. There's so many things happening, even today. Erdogan was just here a year ago or so.
Right? Yeah.
There was a huge protest outside of the embassy.
He's totally crazy.
He's a nut job. He's crazy. He set up his own, in my opinion, a little bias here, but in my opinion, he set up his own coup a couple years back.
Oh, absolutely.
Because what happened then? You know what happened? Again, a lot of the intellects, a lot of the journalists, a lot of the professors, they were thrown in jail.
Yeah.
It's his opportunity to be able to take back. This is getting a little too out of control, people. Let's get these people who are starting to talk against me out of the way. So plenty of these people were thrown in the jail, and he got order back. He shut off Facebook. He shut off all the outside sources. He controls the internet over there. I mean, it's almost like a lesser degree of what North Korea is. He's still a president. He's not a president. He's pretty much he's a dictator.
Loses, yeah.
You know, a president doesn't turn off access to the outside world.
He's a president exactly like Kim Jong-il is a president, or Kim Jong-un,
right.
pardon me, is a president, because he gets elected every year or every term. He gets reelected, but there's no one else to vote for. And if you were to vote for somebody else, you'd probably be executed anyways.
It's a sad state, but yeah, it's true.
Now, that kind of leads up. One of the reasons why we're doing this particular edition of the podcast now is because of the April 24th date that's coming up. Now, there's an event that happens every year in Washington, D.C. Can you give us a little background and explanation as to what that is?
Sure. These things happen actually all over the U.S. The ones that I attend now is the one in Washington, D.C., because it's the closest one. But you have them in LA, New York, Chicago, anywhere that there's a huge Armenian population, there's going to be one. So on April 24th, unless that lands on a weekend, most of the time they like to do it in the middle of the week, Tuesday through Thursday, one of those days. But it does go on between 4:30 and 6:30, right in front of the Turkish embassy over in DC. And the wild thing about this is, I'm sure some things have leaked. They don't really release the day and time until it gets much closer to the date. And the reason for that is because of the counter protests that happened.
Oh, wow.
And so basically it's between 4:30 and 6:30. They haven't even released the date this year. However, April 24th lands on a Wednesday.
Yeah, it's a Wednesday this year.
Therefore, I'm assuming it's actually going to be on Wednesday.
A little side question, but is that like a secret within the Armenian community? Like you guys whisper that in dark corners? hey, it's going to be on the 24th at 11 a.m.
Yeah.
You know, is that kind of stuff that goes on, or is it like you're all part of some larger group and you all get an email or something that says, hey, it's going to be at this time at this place?
That's the latter.
I like the quiet corner whispering better.
Yeah, that would be
very clandestine.
That happens in the movie. And the ANCA, which is the Armenian National Committee of America, is the one that they don't run it per se, because there's actually a couple different groups, the Armenian Youth Federation as well as the Armenian Revolutionary Federation, which is basically two groups that continue to educate and continue to be political activists within this field. And it's not just about commemorating the Armenian Genocide. It's about other stuff too, right? Our fight isn't just to get this genocide to be agreed upon. It's to raise funds and everything like that to continuously support people in Armenia, because they're still trying to recover here. They're getting to a point finally where it's getting better. And a lot of people are actually moving back. I have a few of my friends that left here and have moved there to live there.
That's very brave of them.
It's beautiful now. I mean, they have constant source of electricity now.
Talk about first world problems.
Right. I mean, you don't think about these things, right? But yeah, during Soviet rule, and even well after that, when the Armenians were trying to gain independence, the power would come from neighboring countries and they would shut it off because they needed it. So it was their way again of control. But yeah, so coming back to what you just asked, though, it is probably going to be April 24th. And what it is basically, again, a demonstration demanding justice and recognition. The April 24th protests are specifically to demand that.
Just so we're really clear, it's literally just a protest demanding that the Turkish government admits that this actually happened.
Correct.
Even though the term genocide was coined as a result of what happened in Armenia in the first place.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. One of the craziest, nothing's crazy to me anymore. It's been noted in history what Adolf Hitler has said. And I don't know if you guys have heard his quote or not. He basically said, and I quote, "Who after all speaks today of the annihilation of the Armenians?" And he said this during one of his speeches about what the Nazis were about to do to the Jewish people. If you don't correct your past, it's going to continuously happen. And it continues to happen today in Rwanda and Nigeria and, Darfur, all those places. It's happening today, and it's not going to stop unless people push these other people to other countries that have committed these things to admit it, to have to provide these reparations in order to get out of there. And knowing that there's a consequence to these things and doing it, it might stop people. Probably won't, because people in general, you have quite a few, much more good than bad, but you do have those evil people who just don't care. It's sad because who knows if the U.S. or if other countries at the time had done something, would the Holocaust have happened?
I think the answer to that is definitely no.
Yeah.
I don't think it would have.
I don't think it would have either. Certainly Adolf Hitler wouldn't have said what he said to get the backing of his generals and everybody else.
Sadly, it doesn't change the hate, which is what is really the underlying cause, the foundation of all this stuff anyways. A hatred for some group for some reason.
Right.
It's not going to change the hate for that group, but it's going to change the extreme reaction to that hate.
Correct.
I mean, we have hate groups in the United States, sadly enough. So, this is 2019 and here we are. We still got neo-Nazis and skinheads and, even racial and ethnic groups that just hate other groups. And I still can't figure it out, but it happens. So nothing's going to change the hate that's unfortunately part of human nature. But I think it would have stopped wholesale
fix the
murder.
Response.
Yes, exactly. That's
what it's all about, fixing the response. We do end up going there. Unfortunately, in recent years, it wasn't like this before. But I think they've realized that there's some ground that they need to make back up here. There are counter protests on the other side of the street, literally.
And this turns into a 3-ring circus, I would assume.
Sometimes it does. And the sad part about it is if anybody does come out, you'll see it too. It is a blatant troll job of the people on the other side to get a rise out of people.
Oh, wow.
They blast Turkish music. They mimic people being beheaded.
Oh,
that's pretty rough.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It is a opportunity for them to cause controversy, cause news outlets to come and report on these things to say, oh, look at the Armenians attacking the Turks. But at the same time, look at the opposite side. Like, look what's going on to cause that to happen. There's some restraint on our side, but unfortunately, every now and then, somebody will have enough. Enough is enough, and he'll unfortunately cross the lines and go. And next thing you know, there happens to be something occurring in the middle of the street. It has to be broken up by the TC police.
There's a heavy police presence, I would assume.
Very heavy. Yeah. Very, very heavy. They recognize one of the most bitter subjects that they have to deal with in terms of protests. I did speak with a couple cops while I was there a couple of years back, and they definitely told me that. They said this protest is one of the most heated protests we ever have to deal with. And it's just a constant betrayal, we feel, almost from the U.S. in gaining the backing from them, right? Every single president you could possibly think of has said before they've taken office, I'm going to recognize the genocide. I'm going to do it. You will hear the word from me. Obama said it. Trump did not say it because I don't think he was too involved. But every other ones, you have them on tape. You have them speaking to it on the podium and everything like that. Yeah. Then April 24th comes around. They call it a tragic event. They call it a unfortunate incident. Oh. They do give a speech. Yeah. The president will get up and provide a 1-page reading on atrocities that happened. Yeah. But they never say the word genocide because they have a gag rule. There is a clear gag rule in politics here in the U.S. when it comes down to that word. If you use that word in Turkey, you go to jail.
Oh, wow.
No ifs, ands, or buts. Either that or you get killed. Yeah. There's been Turkish journalists who have reported on it and they've been put in jail.
Wow.
I'm painting a bad picture here saying, that Turks are bad. I have plenty of Turkish friends.
Yeah.
There are plenty of Turks have helped the Armenians along the way.
Right.
It was a government thing. Okay. They just happened to get caught up in it. That's not to say some of them didn't just enjoy it, but I'm not against the Turkish people.
Right.
By any means. We have very similar cultures, minus the religion part. This is just the way it is. And those trolls across the street, of course.
Yeah.
Those are the people who almost, I feel like, you could kind of consider them almost to be requested to be there by the government.
Yeah.
They are involved, man. There is a huge amount of funding that's spent by the Turkish government to gag what's going on here in the U.S. That whole thing with Erdogan a year or two ago here, his guards were arrested because of what happened.
Yeah, because they got physical with the American people.
And they were there to protest Erdogan in general, just his barbaric behavior.
Right.
And the fact that Trump was meeting with this guy here on U.S. soil was just ridiculous. I don't know why you even invite somebody like this to the U.S. to meet with him. But anyway, he was there. There was protests, and next thing you know, these guards are attacking these protesters, American protesters with First Amendment rights and with proper permits to protest. And it was just blatant old people, man, getting kicked in the head.
Yeah.
Bloodied up. Videos. Yeah. It boggles my mind. They were never even arrested at the time. Through videos and stuff, they brought them back and arrested them. But guess what? Only one of them served time. And even that person only served a couple months. And when he went back, he was greeted with this huge celebratory welcome.
Yeah.
Like, you did it. You did it. You did something for us. Like, sick, right? And it bothers me. And they say they dropped charges against Erdogan as well because people were saying that he's the one who ordered it.
Yeah.
You could say he didn't do it. You could say he did do it. I'll just tell you what was seen in the videos.
Yeah.
When he comes out, he's about to get into the car. He points to the people, which are a ways away. He points to them, okay?
Yeah.
Says something to one of his bodyguards. His bodyguard happens to speak in a microphone, and within a couple seconds, the attack happens. And so they put this stuff together in a timeline, and then they showed it. So they're saying it was a coincidence.
Yeah.
He just happened to be out there, and that happened to happen after he spoke to his guard, who happened to speak in his microphone, who happened to that. You know what I mean? It's all coincidence, by the way. That type of stuff happens, and it's so aggravating. And there's hate today too, man. I sent you guys an article in California of Armenian schools getting littered with Turkish flags.
Yeah.
Why?
Why would you do that?
What are you gaining here? Troll job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to get under people's skin and do that.
Some people just love to irritate people.
Yeah, that's what they do, man. So anyways, there's a lot going on.
And it's certainly, even to this day in 2019, it's still very political. Like you said, like the president said they're going to recognize it, but they never actually use the word. But we have a lot of interests in the country. And the minute we say that word, if we say the word, Armenian Genocide, and the Turkish government, who doesn't even recognize that it happens, be like, wait a second, that lease that we gave you on this military base for 50 years, yeah, we're taking that back.
Yep.
Have a nice day.
Yeah. And
the U.S. can't do anything about it. I still think it's a bunch of baloney, and there's no reason that we should be accepting things like that. But it's very political, sadly enough. And it's just to admit it. I mean, and like you said, those who don't understand history are doomed to repeat it.
Yep.
And this is one of those situations where when it came to the Nazis, the hammer came down. They had the Nuremberg trials. Several high-ranking Nazis were executed. Several did long, long stretches in prison. Ones that escaped, we actually allowed the Mossad, the Israeli Secret Service, basically, to hunt them down and drag them back to Israel for trial and, in a lot of cases, execution. And we allowed that kind of stuff to happen. But with this, it's like nothing is being done and nothing will be done. This is going to take who knows how long.
Yeah, I mean, it's been 100 years now, and it's still...
104 years.
104 years, yeah. It's still not recognized. The sad part is that it's not like countries that have recognized it are these small little countries, right? You have France, you have Germany, who's recognized it. England,
they don't have a choice.
Well, yeah. But the sad part is that Germany is recognizing it, and the U.S. is not. They committed the Holocaust. That rule, at least, did, and they have enough oomph to recognize something, and you're just almost you think you're the power, but you're really not, because you're being told what to do on so many different levels. The politicians, lobbyists from Turkey that provide these politicians funding it's crazy. It's funny, they send this propaganda about how much the Armenians lobby in the U.S. And they actually put out an article in Turkey that said, look how much of the Armenian government funding is being spent on lobbying in the U.S. And it was a complete horse, You'll find videos of people backing some of these politicians in D.C. into almost a corner and recording them and saying, how do you sleep at night knowing that you've accepted this money and that these people's almost blood is on your hands because you constantly forward the agenda that Turkey has right now. You're part of the problem in what happened and what continues to happen. It happens every week. Something happens. Last night I was reading, I think it was on like CNN or something like that. And whenever I see the word Armenia, it just catches my eye, right? There was Pen America was supposed to have a not a meeting, but like just a talk at Columbia University. And what happened was that at the last minute, one of the Turkish representatives backed out of the meeting. And next thing you know, Columbia University gets contacted by the Turkish government and says, we feel as though there's not enough Turkish emphasis on what you guys are going to be talking about. And therefore, we highly suggest you get rid of this talk. And Columbia did.
Oh, wow.
They just canceled
That's totally shocking.
Yeah.
For an educational institution.
It was, actually. Come to think of it. But they did. They canceled it. But the thing is that it was canceled only because this one Turkish person left.
Right.
Left because they went and told another Armenian Pen America member to come and talk. So they asked them to come and talk. They left. And then the government called and said, there's too much Armenian influence. Well, not necessarily, because now we have an even amount. Your guy just happened to leave.
Yeah.
So, however you want to look at it,
Jeez.
it's in the state, it's in the Congress. I mean, you're going to have these issues. That's why we're constantly battle. That's why we're constantly in the streets, so that people can just drive by and say, oh, Armenia 1915, let me go look that up.
Yeah.
They see it on a poster. Let me just go look that up and educate myself a little bit. And so that's ultimately what we hope to do, right?
Yeah.
Well, we certainly hope that this particular edition reaches some people. And I certainly think that will open up some eyes for people who may have never even heard of the Armenian Genocide before. I at least heard of it. I just didn't know much about it.
Right.
So we do really appreciate you coming in and sharing all this information and your family story. That's still totally crazy.
Right.
I can't even fathom. My family immigrated to this country in the 1700s, and it wasn't even this country at that time. And I can trace my lineage back to the early 1700s with ease. It's not difficult. I mean, our family landed in an area and they just stayed there. So,
Right.
I mean, literally, I grew up in the house that my father grew up in,
Right.
and my parents grew up in the town that their parents grew up in, so on and so on and so on. I can't even fathom to think, my great-grandfather got his head chopped off on his steps in a foreign country. It's just baffling. And the fact that, like you had mentioned earlier, the fracturing of the family tree, you can't trace your heritage. You just can't. There's no possible way unless everybody gets DNA tested and they link all this stuff together.
Basically,
Yeah, because I didn't know much about it before I met you, and then just over the last couple of years, you just show me these little articles.
Right.
Like, wow, what is going on in the world?
Yeah.
Like, how is this still an issue? So
a thing.
It's just, it's like, how did we not get past this? And this still goes on in the society that we are in today. And then here too, like all the stuff that you show me that just happens like in DC, it's just boggling.
Right. And it won't end. It won't end. U.S. is a world power, the world power. You need the U.S. to recognize it.
Yeah.
Without the U.S. recognizing it, the rest of the world won't. Okay. You got your countries that recognize it, and blah, blah, blah. But what has that done for Armenians and the Turkish people to actually admit to it? Nothing.
Yeah.
Right? They get mad. The Germans, they talk smack to the German government, to the English government, to whoever, French government. And then next thing you know, they're back to business as usual.
Right.
If the U.S. is all morally high, and they need to stop thinking about money, which won't happen,
right,
and start thinking about morally what's right and wrong. But we all know, unfortunately,
we live in a capitocracy. World revolves around money. So
it does. And until it doesn't, we'll continue to have these problems until the end of time.
Well, I certainly hope people who want to be educated, if you're running people, hey, I would send them to this episode. This is a pretty good one. And it is darn heavy. I mean, for me not to have a lot to say, I'm just literally hanging on every word you were saying because it was really good.
Where would you point people to get more information?
So the easiest and the best place I would say is anca.org.
Okay.
And so they have a nice little background history, the types of reparations that we continue to look for as part of this acceptance of genocide.
Yeah.
Donations, if you want to give donations, food, clothes, those types of things, they could all be found on that website. I hang my hat on that website. I mean, that's the place to go.
Yeah, definitely put that in the show notes. Yeah, absolutely.
That's definitely the place to go. Yeah, if anybody has any questions and they end up sending you any information, just let me know, and I'll be glad to speak to people, even if it's on the opposite side. I do want to understand what your thoughts are on what it is.
Okay. Do we have time? It's Rage Reads time. We got to end this with something happy and go lucky. We can't end it this way.
All right, two quick things first.
Okay.
The holdout state is Mississippi.
Oh, okay.
That's kind of a weird state.
I wouldn't expect that.
No, yeah.
Maybe they just haven't gotten around to it yet. I don't know. Anyway, but The Promise is available on Amazon Prime. So
that's correct, and it's on. I believe it's on Netflix as well.
Oh yeah, I didn't check there yet.
Yeah, I believe it's on Netflix as well. So it is really, really a good movie. I went and saw it in the theaters, and I was one of the people that was crying in the theaters because it really does hit home. You see what your grandparents or great grandparents, I should say, really went through, and it's just. That's you'll see a lot of people. Well, I did at least when I was in the theaters, just bawling their eyes out, just watching this thing because it's a tough topic to deal with when you do see people that you love beheaded or burned or whatever have you. And the way they did it, just lumping people's bodies into a big pile and just setting them on fire or just leaving them there.
Yeah.
No burial, no nothing like that. Just complete blatant disrespect. to humans in general. So please, I do appreciate you guys having me on to talk about it, to get the word out. And so if anybody wants to come on to the demonstrations, by all means, come on by and find me, and I'll try to spit some more knowledge your way.
One last thing, though. It's really well attended, correct? The demonstrations are well attended.
They are well attended.
So we're talking thousands, or are we talking tens of thousands?
No, not that big. So the one in New York is thousands. Okay, I'm talking, the marches are outrageous up there. They actually end up closing Times Square to have the speeches at the end of the march.
Wow.
Those bigger places, they're much bigger. Now, I will say that here, there's a lot of the young kids that come to these demonstrations, and so they try to keep it as tame as possible compared to other places.
Okay.
But it does get pretty crazy down here.
I like crazy.
Yeah, you should come. I'd like to have you on my side over there.
So, do we have our rage reads?
Not to make light of the heaviness, but to not leave people in such a heavy state. We do have a rage reads.
We do?
Story. Yeah, I didn't send it to you, so you got to kind of like read it off of my machine.
Okay, fine. I'll just have to...
Just don't bump the cords, because I don't want to unplug anything.
Okay.
It's only the one page there. Can you read that?
Yes, I can read it, though.
All right.
What are you talking about? Can I read it? It's that small.
You're getting to be an old guy. Sorry.
Okay. So this is the segment of the show we like to do. It's called Rage Reads. I read some ridiculous story and try to get at least a humorous reaction. So I'm going to laugh during it, so feel free to do so. Okay, here goes. Last night, my wife's boss from her brand new job invited us over for dinner. Okay, starting out pretty well. On the drive over, my wife reiterated many times to me just how important it was to make a good impression. I scoffed and arrogantly informed my silly wife that I always make a good impression. My wife's boss is a single lady in her 50s, so it was just the three of us. We chit-chatted over drinks and salads and seemed to really be hitting it off. She laughed at my well-timed, perfectly appropriate jokes, and my wife seemed pleased. Soon, she brought out the main course, a nice, big, juicy steak for each of us. As I began to cut into my steak, I was discouraged to discover how undercooked the steak was. Now, I've had my fair share of rare steak. I prefer medium, but I can handle rare. This was several minutes on a hot grill short of rare. I probably could have resuscitated the cow had I tried. Instead, I sat there fidgeting with my knife and fork, worrying about how I was going to get away with not eating this steak. Claim veganism? No, I'd already feigned great enthusiasm upon seeing the steak. Just then, our hostess excused herself to the kitchen to take care of some dessert preparations. As I looked across the fancy dining room table at the open window of this third-story apartment, a cartoon light bulb appeared over my head.
You can do it.
I knew I had to be decisive, realizing that she could return it at any moment. I committed. I grabbed the steak with my hand, gently shook off the juice, and executed a perfect throw right to the center of the open window. Here's the big time screw up. The window wasn't open. It was the cleanest frickin' window you've ever seen in your life. That is, until my mostly raw slab of steak slammed up against it and slowly slid.
Did you take a break?
Leaving a trail of bloody cheese in its wake. My wife, whose steak was a nice medium rare, was unaware of my predicament, turned, jaw dropped, and stared at me like I was an alien from another planet. This look then slowly morphed into more of a "there is no place on this planet you can ever hide from me" expression of anger. My wife's boss heard the thud of the steak on window impact and came quickly. She took in the scene, the steak sitting on the windowsill, the blood trail, my empty plate, and then gave me an inquisitive, puzzled look. I just didn't know what to say. It felt like a minute of silence, but was probably 3 or 4 seconds. Finally, the best I could manage was, I'm so sorry. I am such a klutz. I don't know. I was just cutting it and it slipped. Just ask my wife. I really am a klutz. Right, honey? No help coming from that direction. I will clean this up. I can't believe this. I am so sorry, etc., etc. Both women continued to stare at me like I had escaped from the loony bin as I smeared the blood around the window with my cloth napkin, dusted off the steak, and continued to mutter my incoherent explanation. I knew no one was buying the story. I knew what I had to do. I sleepishly returned to my seat and proceeded to eat every bite of that disgusting, cold, chewy, bloody raw steak. I remained pretty quiet the rest of the evening. My wife's only 2 words to me since the incident are, "I'm fine." Good golly, Miss Molly. That was a good one. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks to Reddit for that one.
Do we know where that came from?
I couldn't pronounce the name. I'm not going to butcher it like you did. The last
I don't even remember what the last one was, but it was. People make Reddit names, and it's several words jammed into one word.
This could be some curse word. I don't know.
Yeah, we're not going to say that. So we apologize to the Redditor who actually posted this story, but we appreciate it. Thank you very much. I think that's going to do it for today. So thanks everybody for listening. We hope that you found this particular edition informative, albeit heavy. Jason, you have anything?
Nope. Just thanks to our guest.
Thanks to our guest, Mr. T. One more time.
Pity a fool.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And thank you everybody for listening, and look forward to doing this again.